A quick disclaimer before watching this video. Sensitive topics such as gore, death, and sex are included in this analysis. Viewer discretion is advised. Game of Thrones might have been one of the most controversial endings to date. And given that it was such a successful TV show even now, after its release in 2011, many fans ended up hating the final two seasons. Well, if I'm being generous, I could even say that other fans at least hated the final season or final 2 episodes. Simply put, it's because the show was so unique, popular, and successful from the release of seasons 1 through 6 that it ended with a major uproar of disappointment from its fans. Originally, Game of Thrones was a series of 5 published books that began in 1996, written by George R.R. Martin. Each Game of Thrones season was basically equal to 1 book. This means that the final 3 seasons are original works by 2 writers of the show, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. I'm pretty sure they didn't want to wait for George R.R. Martin to finish the final 2 books, which are still unfinished to this day. Anyway, the point of this analysis is not really to highlight why these final 2 seasons are so terrible, there have been plenty of videos like that, but rather provide my opinion as to why they're not as bad as people made them out to be. When I started watching or binging the whole show in the span of a single month, my expectations were extremely low. Obviously, earlier fans of the show didn't have the luxury that I did of binging everything, since they had to wait an entire 8 years for its full release from 2011 to 2019. But looking at it now, I don't really think that anybody has an excuse to say that the show is unwatchable just because of its ending. Compared to other opinions you've heard, I at least hope you enjoy my take on the ending, an overall story of Game of Thrones. Keep in mind, I'm going to do things a little bit differently when it comes to these analysis videos of TV shows. I won't be talking about every detail, but I will be exploring the broad topics. Okay, let's break down each of the important characters, and trust me when I say there are a lot. And a massive spoiler warning here. Well, why are you watching this video in the first place if you haven't even seen the show? But a lot of the important characters die off. A major character who dies at the end of Season 1 is a man named Eddard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell, alongside his wife Catelyn Stark and the father of Arya, Bran, Sansa, Robb, and Rickon. Notice how I didn't add Jon Snow to that list because, if you remember, we find out near the end of the show that Jon Snow isn't actually Ned Stark's bastard, but rather both a Targaryen and a Stark. This is what causes Khaleesi.
A small gift for the new Khaleesi. Shall we return to the Khalisar, Khaleesi? Khaleesi.
Have patience, Khaleesi. Forgive me, Khaleesi. Have you ever seen a dragon, Khaleesi?
He will not have you either, Khaleesi.
Khaleesi? Khaleesi. He will die tonight, Khaleesi.
He's already gone, Khaleesi.
Sorry. Daenerys Targaryen to absolutely lose it and become jealous within the last few episodes when she finds out that Jon Snow is the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, but we'll get to that part later because there is a lot to cover first. Moving on to the main thread of the majority of the show, the Lannisters make up some of my absolute favorite characters, such as Jaime, Tyrion, and Tywin Lannister. Don't get me wrong, I love Cersei Lannister as an antagonist, and she's a very well-written character throughout most of the show, but sometimes I found myself becoming frustrated with her because I felt like there wasn't any development, which is probably what forced the writers to ruin Jaime's whole character development, as he's supposed to be in the same boat as her. I mean, it takes him getting his hand chopped off to completely, almost humble him. Yeah, aside from the fact that he has an incestuous affair with his sister Cersei, many fans hated the fact that his entire character development was ruined when he decided to ride back to King's Landing to be with Cersei at the very end of the show, especially after he helped the Starks with a major war against the Night King. I know a lot of it doesn't make any sense, and that's definitely one of the biggest problems I have with the ending. That I will not defend. But there are plenty of things about the ending that I will be giving the benefit of the doubt, so be prepared for my unpopular opinions. Anyway, the Baratheons don't have much of an influence on the ending of Game of Thrones, but they do play a significant role in that they kick off most of the conflict and power struggle for the Iron Throne. When King Robert Baratheon, the husband of Cersei Lannister, dies in Season 1, his son Joffrey becomes the new king. Obviously, Joffrey isn't designed to be likable by any means, as he's a ruthless, power-hungry tyrant who both acts and is literally a child. If you look at the parallels between Joffrey's ruthless behavior as a ruler alongside Daenerys Targaryen's, you start to realize that there really isn't much of a parallel. And I think that's where fans start to get things confused. I'm sure the writers of the show didn't want you to compare any one character with another, especially the antagonists, as there are so many of them. Yes, you could argue that Daenerys only became evil in the span of a few episodes, as opposed to Joffrey, who was both coddled and spoiled by his mother Cersei, as it became ingrained into his very nature to do evil. Okay, first of all, have you seen the runtime of these episodes? They are all at least an hour long. And second of all, we can look at other examples of unique antagonists of the show who were either born into ruthless families, such as Ramsay Bolton and Gregor Clegane, or they were changed by their environment over time, such as Peter Baelish and Theon Greyjoy. I believe that Daenerys falls into both categories, both being born a Targaryen and having a single goal throughout the entire show, which is to claim the Iron Throne. That goal causes her to change immensely, but it's only up until the second to last episode of the final season that she chooses to burn the entire city of King's Landing to the ground, just so she can prove a point to Cersei that she won't give up the Iron Throne so easily. After all, it's what she fought so hard to achieve up until that point, and it also doesn't help that Jon Snow is revealed to be the rightful heir, and he's also a man, so... Look, I won't defend the fact that it goes against Daenerys' very nature to burn an entire city full of innocent people because her unique character trait was supposed to be all about freeing those who are innocent. What I will defend is the timing of it all. For those who think this is a pacing issue, I don't think I would go that far because, as I mentioned before, these episodes are more than long enough. In my opinion, it's simply just a character development issue. Same with Jaime and Cersei coming together in the end. I personally don't think that the final two seasons are that bad. You kind of have to look at these as individual seasons. Yes, there is an overarching story, but you have to remember that most of the characters die, whether it's early on in a season or at the end of a season. So they very much impact the story no matter what. For example, characters like Eddard Stark and Stannis Baratheon die at the end of a season, and King Joffrey of all people dies at the beginning of one. The Night King actually dies in the middle of Season 8, and it is probably my favorite episode in the show, but we'll get to that later. Again, you have to look at these as individual seasons, because if you do it that way, a lot of the final episodes seem just as much of a masterpiece as the earlier ones. When Jon Snow kills Daenerys Targaryen during the series finale, it certainly surprised me, but it didn't necessarily anger me, as killing off important characters is the whole point of the show. Plus, Jon Snow's reason for doing it makes logical sense, even though they loved each other. Daenerys was already too far gone, and that she would have acted just like every other tyrant that we see in the show. Now we can turn to a character named Sandor Clegane, who is notably someone whom a lot of fans didn't feel like he needed to survive as long as he did. You could use him as a counter-argument because I just stated how the whole point of the show is to kill characters off. When Sandor fights Brienne of Tarth, while trying to protect Arya Stark, he ends up losing and Arya leaves him to die. When he comes back later on in the show, I didn't expect it, as I'm sure many fans didn't either. So why does it matter so much that he's one of the few characters who's brought back? I don't see a problem with it, especially at the end when he goes head-to-head with his brother, Gregor Clegane, who was also brought back to life after dying, but in his case with the use of dark alchemy or something, I don't know. Come on, it's not that far-fetched, guys. Gregor Clegane is okay to be brought back into the show, but not his brother? The guy doesn't even talk! What, you didn't think that someone on a professional YouTube analysis channel like me wouldn't get heated? Well, here you go, because I'm here to tell you that you're all judging the end of the Game of Thrones way too harshly. Maybe I'm biased because I watched the show too late and you're all saying, you didn't have to wait 8 years like we did to endure the suffering and disappointment of this mediocre ending. All you had to do was binge it. And you know what I have to say to that? You're all nerds and you can freely rewatch the show at any time. Okay, moving on. I would like to highlight some of my favorite episodes, starting with the Season 1 finale titled Fire and Blood. For many fans, this is a given since it marks the end of Eddard Stark when the new ruler of the Seven Kingdoms, King Joffrey, breaks his promise with Sansa Stark to spare his life after he is believed to commit treason against the crown. And might I say, it's a gruesome death with him getting decapitated. This is also the same episode where a character named Drogo dies, if you remember him being married to Daenerys for a short time. Anyway, I believe that this episode's impactful moment lies with Eddard Stark's death, which alters the course of the rest of the story and ultimately splits up most of the characters up until the very last season. Episode 9 of Season 2, titled Blackwater, is another one of my favorite episodes, because that's when the first official battle takes place. In this episode, Stannis Baratheon is determined to overthrow King Joffrey and take control of the Iron Throne. I think what makes this episode so interesting is the fact that it's not just about the battle, but rather everyone's stance on how they fight, why they're fighting, and even if they fight at all. It cuts between the battle and the brutalities that are happening there, and then to an intense discussion with Cersei and Sansa. Part of Sansa hopes for the battle to be lost so that Joffrey and others would be killed, and that she can most likely be set free by Stannis Baratheon. This kept me on the edge of my seat, making me feel as if the opposing side would have the upper hand, and when all was said and done, I felt this huge sense of dread wash over me as if I was feeling the same emotions as Sansa. What a great episode. Episode 9 of Season 4, The Watchers on the Wall, is about another battle, this time even more emotional, between the Night Watchers and the Wildlings. This entire episode is centered around the differences that everyone obviously has with each other, but also the inner turmoil that Jon Snow faces up until the very end when his secret wildling girlfriend, Ygritte, I don't know how to pronounce that, is killed during the battle. Episode 1 of Season 6, The Red Woman, is about the Red Woman, Melisandre, redeeming herself after working with Stannis Baratheon. She uses her magic to bring Jon Snow back from the dead after he is killed by the Night Watchers for working with and even dating a wildling, which ultimately betrayed their trust. We even learn a secret at the end of the episode. Melisandre is not what she seems, and she is actually a very old woman who used to deceive people with her younger appearance by the use of magic. Yeah, that part really got me off guard. It gave me chills. Episode 9 of Season 6, Battle of the Bastards, is, yep, you guessed it, yet another episode about a battle. Hey, I just really like the way that these battles are portrayed throughout the show. The episode is simple, but it's basically about reclaiming Winterfell against the terrible Ramsay Bolton and his unfair battle tactics. Up until the very end, when Jon Snow finally reaches him, Ramsay is beaten to a pulp and sentenced to die by his own dogs that he starved. This episode made me jump out of my seat quite literally because of how satisfying it was to finally see somebody so horrible die a painful death. Now's the time when I get into some controversial territory because there are 2 final episodes that I absolutely love, one that's in Season 7 and one that's in Season 8. Episode 7 of Season 7, titled The Dragon and the Wolf, is about most of the important characters finally reuniting after so many seasons. While Arya, Sansa, and Bran finally reunite back at their home in Winterfell, everyone else meets at King's Landing to ask Cersei for her help against the army of the dead. At first, she doesn't believe them, but earlier on in the season, they end up capturing an undead soldier to present to her. Seeing the look on her face after being proven wrong made me smile, because she always has that smug look that I hate about her. But after all that, and even after her brother Tyrion tries to reason with her, she ends up lying anyway about helping them. Finally, if the stakes weren't high enough, a character named Samwell Tarly, Jon Snow's best friend from the Night's Watch, learns the shocking secret from Bran Stark, the new three-eyed raven, about Jon, that he's actually a Targaryen and the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, not Daenerys. So many intense and shocking moments for both me and many of the characters were very much present in this episode. But it doesn't even compare to my favorite episode in the entire show, Episode 3 of Season 8, The Long Night. I know, I can see the comments now about how the majority of my favorites include battles. Anyway, I've seen both comments and videos all over the internet about this episode, and it left me extremely disappointed. I'm not saying that everybody hated it, but many people disliked it and lumped it in with the ending of the show because there wasn't enough build-up, the cinematography wasn't perfect, the writing didn't live up to their standards, or whatever the case. I'll start with the writing piece since I thought that was the best part. The backstory of the White Walkers and the Night King were very interesting, due to the fact that they were created so long ago with magic by these creatures called the Children to fight against the First Men. When I learned this over the course of the show, and also that the White Walkers turned against the Children and all humans, I figured who wouldn't find this interesting? Apparently, many fans thought it was dumb writing, and in terms of the ending, that has to be my favorite moment ever, and yet people thought it sucked as well. Why? I actually don't know. I guess because he dies in one episode without much of a fight? As I mentioned before, these episodes are at least an hour long, and this one is close to a full-length film. Also, as a quick side note, the build-up was literally over the course of the entire show when the Night King has his many appearances, so I don't really know what fans mean. I even felt like I was watching a horror movie about a zombie apocalypse, which now leads me to the cinematography. There were lots of complaints about how the lighting was too dark and how you couldn't even see a lot of what they were fighting. I personally think this adds to the buildup of the ending, as well as provides an extra layer of intensity and horror for the viewer. Finally, there's the score. Never before have I been so obsessed with how an ending was executed. Moments before the Night King is killed by Arya Stark, who comes out of nowhere, I was absolutely certain that evil would prevail. The music made me feel both excited and outright agitated for the entire 9 minutes that it played. Look, if you don't watch Game of Thrones for its ending, then at least watch it for this episode. Who knows, you might find it to be a masterpiece just as much as me. That, or you might be like other fans. Lastly, the final complaint that I'll address has to do with Bran Stark, who becomes the three-eyed raven, and then ends up being the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms as Bran the Broken. It wasn't really my favorite part, but I don't see what other decision could have been made, considering Daenerys was killed off by Jon Snow, who was punished by being sent back to the Night's Watch on the Wall, and Tyrion being punished for his past mistakes by, once again, becoming the Hand of the King. In fact, it makes perfect sense, so stop crying about it, whoever you are. Thank you so much for watching. This video took a lot of time to make, so I would really appreciate it if you would leave a like and subscribe. And please make sure to turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a future upload. More quality videos like this one coming soon. Once again, I really appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.